Okay.
Oh.
First of all, I want to say thank you all for attending. And thank you to Jessica for presenting. I am going to let Jessica introduce herself because she knows more about herself than I know about her. I know she's wonderful and I'm grateful that she is here and she's going to impart a wealth of knowledge on you, but you know, don't rake her over the coals. I have warned her that you guys are chatty, so you can feel free to ask questions if you would like. But Jessica, go forth and conquer the world.
Hey, thank you so much, Jennifer. Appreciate it. So my name is Jessica Cox. I'm a Quill Forever Farm Bill biologist here in Arkansas. I am currently out of the Paris, Fort Smith area, so I cover Sebastian, Scott, Franklin, Logan, and Yell counties. But my presentation today is going to be pretty statewide. There are a few, at least one program I'll talk about that's going to be county specific. But for the most part, statewide, we have biologists all across the state. Just throwing that out there, my contact information will be at the end of the presentation. So if you want contact information for somebody more in your area, feel free to reach out and I can send you that information. I've been with Quail Forever since 2017. I actually started up in Harrison, so I covered the northwest, north central part of the state. And then about a year ago, I transferred back down to the Fort Smith area, which is home for me. But today I'm going to be talking with you all about landowner assistance. And here just momentarily, I'll share my screen with you so you can see the presentation. As far as questions go, if you can type your questions into the chat box, or if there's a burning question, feel free to just stop me. Otherwise, since it's kind of hard to do the presentation and check the chat box, we'll probably just leave kind of the end time for questions and just go through them in the order that they come in the chat box. But yeah, please feel free to ask any questions. So I will go ahead and start sharing my screen with you all. All right, can you all see it? Mm-hmm. Good, okay, perfect.
Yes.
Alrighty, so as I said, we're going to be talking about some programs that are available for landowners across the state who are looking for assistance doing conservation work in their woodlands. So we all know that time and money are usually really big constraints when you want to do these conservation projects. So hopefully you'll get some good information out of this. If you have a project that's ongoing, or if you have a project you're thinking about starting, hopefully you'll take something away from this to kind of get the ball rolling on that project. So there's a few different ways that you can get assistance here in Arkansas for landowners. So I kind of broke it down into three main types, and we'll go through each of these throughout the presentation. But the first one is technical assistance. So technical assistance doesn't necessarily mean any money is involved. It's really just getting that advice from the experts on how to get your project started and how to do all the practices. So we do this by doing resource inventories, or you may be familiar, we term them site visits. So where a biologist or a forester will come out to your property and just look over what you've got, go over your goals, and then maybe write you a management plan that details everything that you talked about and kind of some of the stuff that you can do to improve your property. Another type of assistance that we have is that cost share assistance, or not all of them really involve the exchange of money, so more kind of in kind where you're still getting something out of it. There's federal and state programs that provide this assistance. So we'll go into those in a little bit more detail as well, but the cost share assistance is essentially you are getting paid in order to implement these practices. So that, of course, that varies by program. And then the third one type of assistance that we can help with is just labor and equipment. So labor is a big thing, especially if you have extensive acreage. It's not often feasible for a landowner to do it all themselves. So there are also some programs out there that can help you with maybe that labor or the equipment that you might not have to get things rolling. So for example, our prescribed burn associations that we have here in Arkansas, we'll go into those in more detail. And then like Game and Fish, there are some places where you can go to help with the equipment needs for projects for no cost to you. So again, that technical assistance, those resource inventories, management plans, or even just contacts. So I get questions all the time for things that really aren't in my general area of expertise. But the great thing about me is I have connections to people that pretty much can do anything. So as a landowner, you know, reaching out to that one person, we can provide those important networking contacts and get you in touch with people who can further assist you in that area. Those resource inventories, again, are important. So that's the site visits where we actually come out to the property. But there's also a lot that we can gather just from sitting at our desks, from certain computer programs that we use. We can look at the soils of the area, get a good idea of that, use our topo maps, all different kinds of stuff now, thanks to technology that we can gather just from sitting in the office. Those management plans that we can provide, again, those are going to give you those recommendations and kind of guidance on how to do the conservation practices that we discussed, and also a timeline of work. You know, some of these practices require that the practices be done at very specific times of the year. So we can provide that timeline just to help you get going. And again, the contacts, so additional conservation organizations and even vendors that you can hire out if you choose to do so. So now going into that cost share and in-kind assistance, the federal, there are so many program options. I'm really just going to cover some of the bigger ones that we see, some of the more common ones that we see people go through. This is definitely not an exhaustive list of programs that are available. If you know of a program or you've heard of one, you want more information on it, and I don't cover it here, again, please feel free to reach out to me. But through the federal side, we work with the Natural Resources Conservation Service and call them NRCS. I'm going to throw a lot of acronyms out at you here. So I'll try my best to make sure that I tell you what those acronyms stand for. So the two ones that I'm going to talk about through the federal, through that NRCS, is going to be EQIP, which is the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, and then RCPP, which is the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. So I'm going to go over those. And then, of course, with our state, we do have some in-kind programs that can help with material. We're going to briefly cover that. That's the Acres for Wildlife Program, or AFW. And then there's some others, the non-government organizations or nonprofit that we'll discuss. So, for example, we have a Quail Forever Habitat crew that can help with the labor and with doing prescribed burns. We'll go over that in a little bit more detail. So EQIP, through the Natural Resources Conservation Service. So these are the federal programs that we're going to talk about. So kind of an overview of what EQIP is and how it can help landowners. It's a voluntary program, and that's very important, I think, to point out to people. A lot of people, they get kind of when you start talking about the government and doing stuff on their property. So I always like to point out that this is a voluntary program, and there's a process, there's a conservation planning process that happens. We get a conservation plan, and then if you decide you want to help get some cost share to implement these, then you can come in and sign up. That doesn't mean that we have authority over your property or that we can just come and do whatever we want on your property. Absolutely not. Again, that conservation planning process will come out, we'll do resource inventories, we'll complete assessments, we'll get a management plan put together for your project. You come in and you sign up for the program, you fill out the application, all the required documentation. And essentially the way the program works is if you are to get funded through the EQIP program for these practices, and we'll go through some of the practices that are available for doing work specifically in forest lands and woodlands here in a moment. You install the practices, you sign your contract, you install the practices, and once those practices have been completed and they've been certified by a biologist or by a forester, by an NRCS representative, they will give you the payment for that particular practice. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into this program that we don't necessarily have time to cover, but that's about the general gist of the program. We make a plan, you decide what practices that you want to implement, you apply for funding, and if you are funded, you implement the practices, and then you receive that cost share payment for those practices that you implement. There are special payment rates. So if you are a veteran farmer, beginning farmer rancher, historically underserved, or socially disadvantaged farmers can actually receive a little bit higher cost share payment. Unfortunately, NRCS does not label women as historically underserved. That is important. We get a lot of people coming in asking that question. So unfortunately, women do not fall into that category. But if any of those others apply to you, then you can actually receive a little bit higher cost share payment for implementing those practices. And essentially, folks that are eligible, farmers, ranchers, forest landowners, you go in, you get a farm and tract number established with FSA, and as long as you can get that farm and tract number and you meet a couple of other eligibility requirements, you're eligible. So you don't have to have like cattle or goats or sheep or crops. If you just got forest land, or if you've just got open land that you're wanting to do something with, you're eligible. So again, kind of how it works. If this is a program you're interested in, kind of the steps of that process would be that initial contact with either your NRCS office or with a biologist. So we, as Quail Forever biologists, we partner with NRCS, so we also work through their programs. So that initial, coming into the office, picking up the phone, giving us a phone call, that's going to start that conservation planning process where we're going out, we're collecting the resource inventories, we're defining your objectives, we're making those recommendations, getting that management plan put together. And then once you know exactly what you want to do, we can start the application process. Then this is important. So if you're approved for funding, so it is a competitive program. So just because you apply doesn't mean that you're going to get funded. But if you do, like I said earlier, if you're approved, you implement those practices that are in your conservation plan and in your contract, and then you receive the cost share payment for that practice. Now, some of the practices that we offer, there's hundreds of practices that are available through the EQIP program. But because this is specifically women owning woodlands, I try to focus on more of those that pertain to forest land and woodland ecosystems for this presentation. But if you have land other than forest land, or if you have cattle or pasture, there's a plethora of practices to choose from. So conservation cover is essentially going in and reestablishing those native grasses, those native wildflowers in areas where they're non-existent. So this is going to be one that we really do more so for wildlife habitat. But oftentimes that's in conjunction with doing work through our woodlands. Another one is tree and shrub planting. So if you have an area that you'd like to go and establish some native shrubs, or maybe go into an area to establish some native trees, there's a little bit more than just, going out and planting the trees that's involved in this. Oftentimes we work with the foresters to figure out how many trees you need, where they need to go, et cetera, et cetera. But that is another option. Prescribed burning is a big one. So as most of you are probably aware, if you've sat in on any type of webinar talking about maintaining your forest lands, prescribed fire is a big one. That's probably the best tool that we have to manage our woodlands. And so through the EQIP program, you can get that cost share assistance for actually conducting those prescribed burns through your woods, and also for establishing the permanent fire breaks around your woodlands so that you can maintain those burns as you should to properly manage your forest. You want to make sure you're burning on 3 to 5 year rotation. So you're getting those permanent fire breaks established that you can then maintain after that will allow you to keep that burn regime up. So it's an excellent tool to have, because as we know, this stuff can get very pricey. So getting that cost share assistance is often very beneficial. And oftentimes it's that line between people doing it and not being able to. So if that's something that you're interested in, if you've always wanted to burn, but maybe you didn't have the resources to put in the fire breaks to do it safely, this is a great resource for you. Forest stand improvement is another big one that we do. So whether wildlife is a goal of yours, or is a resource concern of yours, or if it's just forest health in general, I think it's safe to say that an overstocked forest isn't good for anything. It's not good for wildlife. It's not good for trees. Forest health in general an overstocked forest is just generally not good. So the forest stand improvement practice through EQIP, if you apply for it, is essentially to go in and thin your woods. So whether that's through a commercial harvest, if that's a goal or objective of yours, or if you're just going out and you're just wanting to get rid of some of the undesirable species, if you've got a lot of cedar in there, a lot of elms, maples, depending on your site. And again, those resource inventories are going to let us know what trees should be growing there. But it's essentially just going in and thinning your woods. You can look at it also as light management. So as you're thinning those trees, you're opening the canopy up, you're allowing light to come through, and that's going to allow the herbaceous vegetation, your grasses, your wildflowers, grow up underneath there. So that's going to improve your forest health, your wildlife habitat, your soil health, your water quality. It's going to impact a lot of resource concerns, a lot of areas that we really want to target. This practice, in conjunction with the prescribed burning and managing it, can really address a lot of those concerns. And then another practice I wanted to throw in there is these riparian buffers. So we can go into areas along creeks, along streams, along riverbeds that are suffering from erosion, because oftentimes they're clear cut and they're not properly managed. We can go in and help fence these areas off. So if you have an area of woods and let's say you had some cattle land, but there was no fence and those cows are getting in there to those wood areas and they're getting in there to the bank, that can cause extreme erosion issues. So we can actually help with fencing those areas off and reestablishing them in native vegetation to prevent that erosion and to promote healthier riparian buffers. Another practice that we have that's one of my favorites is rare and declining habitat restoration. So we specifically use this. It's really a combination. This practice involves the thinning and the burning. It's really what we're looking to target is that woodland, savanna, and grassland restoration. So for the purposes of this, we'll focus on that savanna and woodland restoration. So this practice can be great if you are specifically wanting to get your woodlands back into the woodland savanna restoration. And just real quick, so you have your grasslands, which are like your prairies, so mostly open grasses, very few trees. That kind of transitions into your savannas, which are oftentimes actually more of a grassland than a woodland, because that grass component, that herbaceous component, is still more prominent than the tree component. Then you kind of transition even further into your woodlands. So those are going to be where you start to see that transition between more trees versus more grasses. And then you go into like a closed canopy forest system, which is unfortunately what we see across most of Arkansas today, are those closed canopy. Historically, most of these closed canopy forest systems in Arkansas would have been open woodlands or savannas. So we can use this rare and declining habitat restoration in order to actually go back and set these areas back into what they naturally should be. And then forest openings and snag creations, that's another one that we can do through some other practices. So, up to an acre, if you've got, ideally for about every 40 acres, you'd have about an acre within your woodlands of open area. These forest openings are different and kind of separated from glades. So glades are also openings within our forest, but they're characterized by extremely shallow, rocky soils, very specific plant types, and they're oftentimes very similar to little micro deserts within our forest. So you'll find like the eastern collared lizards out there, tarantulas, snakes, prickly pear. You'll often find in these areas. We can use that rare and declining habitat restoration on those glade areas. But general forest openings within your woods are basically just areas where it's fairly open, no trees, and those grasses and those wildflowers can grow up in those areas and provide forage and cover for your wildlife. And then snag creation is another important one for your woodlands, for your forests. So these, snags, den trees, the snags are essentially just standing dead trees. And there's a lot of wildlife that utilize these. So you've got, a number of birds. So most people think of woodpeckers when they think of these, but there's raccoons will use these den trees, owls will use the den trees, and bats. We have 4 or 5 species of listed endangered or threatened bats here in Arkansas. And a lot of people don't realize that some of these bats will actually utilize our trees for pupping or for giving birth. So not necessarily in a cave. So, they don't have to be the dead trees, but having those is very important because they also provide important bugging habitat. So we can actually use these programs to go in and create these snag trees for our wildlife to use. All right, so that was the EQIP program, a very brief run through of that. So now we'll move on to the next federal program that I'd like to talk about, and that's that RCPP program. Now, this one is not statewide. The EQIP is statewide. So no matter what county you live in, you can sign up for the EQIP program. So this project, this is the North Arkansas Quail Focal Landscape Project. And as you can see on your screen, those counties highlighted, I think there's 14 or 15 counties up there. Those counties are the ones eligible. So if you or somebody you know maybe has land. Another important thing that I want to point out about this particular program is we ran this program for 3 years. We had great success with it, implemented a lot of practices, improved a lot of habitat across the state. They are in the process right now of and I just lost the word, renewing this. So this is not actually, this project program is not available for this fiscal year funding, but they are in the process of renewing it, hopefully for another 3 years. But it's important enough that I just wanted to go ahead and briefly touch on it for this webinar. So again, we have those counties that were in red, and within those counties, we have priority areas. So these priority areas are determined. So these are areas where a lot of restoration work has already been completed or is currently ongoing. So the goal is, I like to call it the ripple effect. So you start with an area of work, and then you hope to target those landowners around them. And then hopefully you'll target landowners around them. So like a drop of water in a bucket, it just kind of ripples out from there. And before you know it, you have these landscape scale projects that are going on. So that's kind of what these priority areas allow us to do. Some funding specifics, and again, this is being renewed, but from what I've been told, everything should pretty much stay the same. So normally these are 3-year contracts that we have with our partners. The last one, we had close to $600,000 that was available through this funding program. So that's about $200,000 a year that we can specifically put towards these projects. Kind of the way the payment works is NRCS, which is that federal side. They pay for 75% of the total cost of all the practices. And then the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission will come in and pay that additional 25%. So whereas your regular EQIP is not 100% cost share, it's usually either 60 to 90. This is 100% cost share. So you should get 100% of the cost that it's going to take to do this work. You should receive that 100% cost share. Eligibility for this program, again, you have to be within those eligible counties. If the land is leased and not owned, you have to, just like with the EQIP program, you have to have a lease form with the landowner giving you permission to do all this work. You have to get that farm and tract number established with the Farm Services Agency. And then you have to obviously complete the application, necessary paperwork, and you do all that through your NRCS office. So the same way you would apply for EQIP, you would also apply for this program as well. This program, so I'll go back. So this program really focuses on bobwhite quail habitat restoration. And a lot of people don't typically associate bobwhite quail with forest lands or with woodlands, but that's absolutely not true. So there's a lot of work that we can do in our woodlands. So the thinning, the burning, you can get cost share. For the practices we mentioned through EQIP, those are the practices you choose from in this program. To go and improve your woodlands or restore those woodlands. But with that, the only real difference between the forest stand improvement through EQIP versus the forest stand improvement through this RCPP program is that when you're thinning, you can thin to different levels, right? So bobwhite quail will utilize areas that are oftentimes much thinner than what some some folks are willing to get down to as far as tree density goes. So if you wanted to do forest stand improvement, specifically for bobwhite quail, you could go through this program and you would just have to thin down to those kind of bobwhite standards of what they would be able to utilize. So now I'm going to go into the Acres for Wildlife program, which is through the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. So this one is not necessarily woodland forest specific, but oftentimes if you've got woodland, or if you do those forest openings and you're not quite seeing that natural regeneration that you want come back, or if you do have some open areas right up next to your woodlands, that's why I wanted to mention this program, because I think it's a fantastic program for landowners. This is one of those in-kind programs, so there's no actual money being given to landowners. But this is that native warm season grass and forb seed mix, and then any herbicide that you need maybe for the site prep to get this stuff planted, they give you. So the biologist comes out, we look at the site, we figure out, what the site prep is, what kind of herbicide you might need, and then we order that herbicide and we give it to you for however many applications that it takes in order to get that site prep. And then once it comes time to plant the seed, we give you the seed to plant. So again, there's no cost share involved, as in they don't give you money, but they give you the materials that you need to get the work done. So you're essentially responsible for making sure the herbicide gets sprayed and making sure the seed that we give you gets planted. There are, again, kind of how this program works. Got that initial contact again with the biologist, either Quail Forever or an Arkansas Game and Fish Commission private lands biologist. You go through that planning process. That's a critical part of all of these programs, is you have to go through that planning process. You apply for the program, and then again, if you're approved, you will receive that herbicide. We will order it. We will make sure it gets to you. And then when it comes time to plant, you will get that seed from us. A few eligibility things for this program is it's a 5-acre minimum. So you have to have at least 5 acres, and it's about a 40-acre maximum, give or take. Sometimes we might have some extra seed left over, or sometimes we can bump that up if it's a really good project. So let's say, for example, you're doing a lot of great work for your woodlands, and you've thinned and you're burning and you're doing all this, and you've got, a little bit over that 40 acres next to it that you want to plant, we can work with you on that if you've already got a really good project going on. Now going into kind of those, labor assistance. So our habitat crew, so Quail Forever has a habitat crew here in Arkansas. And what they do is they can actually, if you get your fire breaks installed and you want to burn, but you're like, I don't really know how to burn, I'm not really comfortable burning on my own, or I don't have the manpower to burn, our habitat crew will come out and burn your property for no charge. On you, you must have the fire breaks installed, and it is a competitive program, so we put it into a system and it's ranked. But they will come out. They're a 5-person crew. They're a highly trained crew. They've got the equipment that's needed. They'll come out and actually burn your property. Now, I say for free. So if you're not going through any other kind of cost share program where you're getting that payment for doing a burn, you don't have to pay our habitat crew anything for coming out and doing the burn. If you are going, let's say you sign up for EQIP, you get that cost share for prescribed burning, you would then be required to give what you get in cost share just for that practice for prescribed burning to our habitat crew. And that's because it keeps us from double dipping, because our habitat crew is funded through the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission and through several different sources. If you're getting paid for it, we just basically take it back. We're not making any money because they're already giving us that money to do a burn. So we're just essentially kind of taking that money back. It's not, like I said, we're not really making anything.
Isn't it, Jessica? Jessica,
Yes,
isn't it headed up by a woman? One of the crews anyway?
it was until very recently. So Maya Larson, she was our habitat crew boss.
Yeah.
She says, I say unfortunately, but I'm very happy for her. She has actually been promoted up into another position, a national position within our organization. And that's just happened within the last couple of weeks. So we've just announced today that her position is actually being filled by another member of the crew, Courtney Todd, but unfortunately, he's not a woman, but it was.
Not a
Maya.
woman. No, she looked very competent.
Yes, Maya was absolutely fantastic. It's really sad to see her go here from, from our state habitat crew, but I think she's going to do great work up in her new national job. So, but yes, until just recently, our habitat crew was headed up by a woman. But then, so the next thing that they can provide assistance with is forest stand improvement. Now this is because they're only a 5-person crew, their primary focus is on prescribed burning and getting those burns done. But if we have very specific, like those like glade restoration projects or maybe small acres of cedar removal, that one's kind of on a case-by-case basis as they can fit those into their schedule around the burning. But they can go in and help with some of the forest stand improvement. And with that one, the landowner is responsible for providing the herbicide, but then our crew will come out and they'll either do, the cut and drop or the hack and squirt, the actual labor part of that for the landowner. And again, unless you're getting cost share assistance to do that practice, they don't charge anything for that. A couple of other ones that they can help with, again, burning is their priority. But oftentimes we do have them help with herbicide treatment. So the thing with herbicide is we want to make sure that it's getting put out correctly and that we're only using the absolute, maximum amount that we have to put out there. So they do have equipment oftentimes, if the landowner can provide the herbicide, or a lot of times if you go through that Acres for Wildlife program and you get the herbicide from Game and Fish, our crew can actually come out and put the herbicide and do the spraying for you. If it's not something you're comfortable with, or if you don't have, the knowledge to do it, they can help with that. And then the same with the plantings. We'll talk about it here momentarily, but Game and Fish does have the sprayers and seeders that you can use for planting. They lend that equipment out to landowners for no charge. So sometimes our crew can get a hold of that and come out and help you with the planting. Again, if you're not really sure what you're doing, they can come out and help with that as well. So how that kind of works, if that's a program that you might be interested in, again, the initial contact, we're going to develop plans. We're going to lay out where your fire breaks need to be, if it's for a burn, so that you can get those installed before the crew comes out and does the burn. We'll work with our crew boss. They'll develop a prescribed burn plan, get all that information. We put you into the system, and obviously prescribed burning is the top thing that they do for us. So it's just a matter of waiting for those right weather conditions. This comes with burning. And once they're available, they'll call you. And if your fire breaks are in, they can come out and do the burn. Or if you've purchased your herbicide and you're ready for them, once they have a day where they can come out and do that, or if you have your seed that's ready to be planted, they can come out and take care and help you out with that labor part. Or just the know-how. A lot of folks, they really want to do this work, but they're not comfortable going out and spraying herbicide or making sure that the seed gets planted correctly. So it's a great program that we have that can provide, some of that additional assistance for landowners. I think I already went through this, but how it works, the funding, if you're not getting any cost share assistance, this is completely free of charge. You just have to get your own fire breaks in, or provide the seed or herbicide for the crew to actually put out. And then if you're receiving cost share for any of these practices through another program, you just give them that cost share payment, however much it says it was in your contract. So now I'm going to go over some of the labor and equipment assistance that's available. So we've got the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, as I mentioned earlier. They do have equipment that landowners can rent for doing herbicide applications and for planting these native grasses and native wildflowers. So, they've got a variety of different sprayers that you can use. You just have to have either the tractor or the ATV or the UTV to pull it with. I believe they also maybe have some backpack sprayers that you can use if you're trying to do some spot spraying. And then the drills. So they have no-till drills that have the native seed box attachment that you specifically use for planting native grasses and wildflowers, or they have the broadcaster, so like the Vicon spreader, if you choose to broadcast that way. But they do have that equipment for you to use. You just do have to have access to a tractor to utilize that equipment. The Arkansas Department of Forestry, they do have landowner assistance. So back to that technical assistance, oftentimes we work with our foresters with the Department of Forestry to help write forestry management plans and to conduct those site resource inventories and the site visits. But in addition to that technical assistance that they have, they do also offer some landowner assistance that is that they charge for. So the biggest one, and I pulled this information directly from their website. So this is the most up-to-date based on their website, but they do custom fire lane construction at $85 an hour. And then they will also help landowners with conducting those prescribed burns at $50 per acre with a $575 minimum. So if you have small acreage, sometimes it's meeting that $575 minimum. You can always go through our habitat crew, but if you've got large acres and you want to go through the Arkansas Department of Forestry to get that assistance with getting the burn done, again, they've got the manpower, they've got the equipment to do it. So if you're not really comfortable doing it yourself, or you don't have the equipment or the manpower, you can always reach out to them to help get assistance with that burning. Because like I said, burning is the big one, because that's our biggest management tool that we use for our woodlands. And then the last one I want to talk about are prescribed burn associations. So these are a fantastic resource for landowners, and that is because it is a group of landowners essentially working together to help each other burn their properties. So that's when we say PBA, that is Prescribed Burn Association. Right now, I believe we have 4 or 5 Prescribed Burn Associations in Arkansas. There's one in Central Arkansas. There's 2 in like North Central Arkansas, 1 in Northwest. And then we're in the process of starting one here in Yell County, so kind of West Central Arkansas. So what it is, it's an organization of landowners. So it's kind of consists of a group of elected board officials. So you've got your typical president, vice president, treasurer, secretary that are responsible for kind of managing the group. You put together bylaws. So these bylaws are really just kind of the rules and what you're going to go, how the PBA is going to run. What are the rules? How do you become a member? All that stuff will be set up in the bylaws that the landowners and the Prescribed Burn Associations actually set up on their own. And then you have the general members. So these are folks that normally for Prescribed Burn Associations, there's like a $25 to $30 annual membership fee. But that gives them access to all the landowners within the Prescribed Burn Association to help with labor, but it also gives them access to equipment to conduct these prescribed burns on their property. Again, a really great tool to have. So again, I mentioned the equipment.
Jessica, does the PBA have insurance for the burn insurance?
So that depends on the PBA. So the way they're set up, the ones in Arkansas, to the best of my knowledge, do not. The PBA itself does not have insurance. That is up to the landowner to make sure that the landowner has insurance. Because in these, the landowner will be the burn boss on each of these burns. So there's not like a dedicated burn boss unless the PBA wants one. So the landowner becomes the burn boss. That's their responsibility to either make sure that they already have it through their, when they purchase the property, sometimes that will be included in all that. If not, then they'll have to make sure that they've got that. But then the equipment that the PBA has access to is actually purchased. So Quail Forever, the Game and Fish Commission, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife actually pool resources, and we get a trailer and we fill it with a bunch of equipment for each of these PBAs. And essentially we put it on long-term loan to each of these PBAs to use to conduct their burns. So you're going to have your personal protective equipment, you're going to have drip torches, you're going to have your hand tools, so your rakes, your Pulaskis, whatever you may need. And then U.S. Fish and Wildlife, I know that the ones that we have now, they're actually putting in water pumps like that go on the back of an ATV for the prescribed burn associations to have. So we make sure that you have all of that equipment. Again, they're on long-term loan to these PBAs. The PBA doesn't have to give us any money to get these. There's a lot of burning that needs to be done in the state, and we need all the help we can get. There's not enough resource professionals out there to burn everything that needs to be burned. So getting these landowners on board and providing them with the personnel, which is a big hindrance to landowners burning on their own. They don't have the manpower to do it. So with the PBAs, you have access to all the members of the PBA, whether they're paying. Sometimes we have people join the PBAs that aren't landowners. They just want to help burn stuff. They just, like me, they just like to burn stuff. So they just do it for fun. And then again, you'll have access to those agency staff. So Quail Forever, Game and Fish, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, when we're available. And then the training, that's another big thing. A lot of people aren't comfortable with fire. So we work together with Quail Forever, Game and Fish. We conduct Learn to Burn 1 and 2 classes. And then there's also very recently, we have secured very limited space, maybe one per PBA, but to actually send somebody from the PBA through Burn Boss School to get them familiar with all of that. So again, that's been a very recent thing where we've been able to get those seats in those classes specifically for our PBA members. But we provide all the training typically in our bylaws. Most PBAs require that all of their members go through these classes before they're allowed to, either have their property burned or really participate in a burn. That's required. And that training is on us. So while this is a group of landowners, the landowners make all of the decisions on what the PBA does. We're still there just to kind of help out. We'll help review burn plans. We'll go check out fire breaks. We'll go check out units before the PBA goes out there, make sure that, there's no snags, they're not running anything. We provide training, but really these landowners, they just kind of take off on their own. I know I was involved with helping get the North Central Arkansas Prescribed Burn Association started. And actually, if I go back, there's a picture of us on one of our first burns. So that was myself and a Game and Fish, the private land supervisor, and just a group of landowners. And we went out and we burned their property, and they were so happy. I had one lady, and I will never forget, she was terrified. She'd never held a drip torch. She'd never done fire. And she was absolutely terrified. And I kind of, pushed her to take the drip torch. It's not that scary. And I mean, by the end of the day, she was just, you'd think she would have been doing this her whole life. Another lady, she was in the same boat, kind of scared, and she finally was like, I'm going to do it. And she had her purse with her, and she told her husband, she goes, hold my purse. And then she grabbed the drip torch off, and she just took off with it like she'd been doing it her whole life. So they're fantastic. I love working with the PBAs and helping them out, and it helps us out because we get significantly more acres burned. Within the first year, that Prescribed Burn Association burned more than 200 acres. With just them. So that's pretty significant. And also considering that I believe the youngest person in that Prescribed Burn Association was maybe in their mid-50s. That was the youngest person. So they hit the ground running. So if that's something you're interested in, if you're interested in getting one started in your area, maybe kind of the steps of how we do that. So you would reach out to your local biologist, whether Quail Forever, again, Game and Fish. We'll kind of assist in like the planning and the logistics. We get what we call an initial interest meeting set up. And this is really just to gauge how many landowners we might have in that area interested in actually forming this PBA. So we talk about what a PBA is, what all is involved in it, all that good stuff. If we have enough people interested, then we will schedule an actual startup meeting. So during the startup meeting, that's where we're going to elect officials. So in order to officially start a PBA, you have to have a president and a treasurer. So as long as we can get those 2 roles filled that night, then we start looking at the bylaws and going over all that. And once we get everything rolling off, sometimes these PBAs will go in and they'll apply to become a 501c3, so a nonprofit. So they can still receive donations from folks if they want to, and then they get those membership dues, which help them also pay for stuff that might break or what, water, snacks on the fire line. I know we had a lady in our PBA up there, and she always made cookies, and we'd have somebody on a 4-wheeler just going around with a thing of cookies, and it was the best burns I was ever on in my life. So that's kind of the PBA and how that works. So, if you've got one in your area, feel free to reach out. I can give you the contact information to become a member. And if there's not one in your area and you think you and some other landowners might be interested, reach out. We're hoping to get as many of these started across the state as we possibly can, because again, there's not enough of us. We need more fire on the ground, and it's just good for landowners to be out there working on their own land. And I can go out there and tell somebody all day, well, do this, do this, do this, but if the landowner doesn't understand why they're doing it, then to me, having them understand why they're doing it and why it's important, and even how to do it on occasion, is incredibly important. So this screen right here is just some more information. Got some great websites. These are places that have excellent resources, or they may even have programs that are available. If you're interested in any of that stuff. And then that's my presentation. So my contact information is right there on the screen. So if you wanted to jot down my email or my phone number, if you have any questions after this, or you'd like some contact information for folks in your area, please reach out. I'm always available, and would love to chat with you or get you whatever you need. So with that, I guess we can open it up for questions.
There was a question in the chat box. I believe it came in while you were talking about the PBAs, and it says, are these trainings held virtually?
So that's a great question. The Learn to Burn 1 class we did end up recording all of those classes, and they are on our Quail Forever in Arkansas YouTube page. So there's a series of videos that go through what you would normally get in an in-person. They're extensive. These normally the in-persons are an all-day event, but this way you can go in and kind of watch them at your leisure. So they'll go over everything from why we burn, pre-burn planning, writing a burn plan, weather, all that kind of good stuff that goes. So you can kind of watch it on your own. The Learn to Burn 2 classes, those are not simply because those are where we take folks that have gone through the Learn to Burn 1 class, and we actually get them out on a fire. We put them on the fire line, show them all the tools, how to do everything. So that is an in-person one. But if you go through the Learn to Burn 1 class and you're interested, we actually did a women's Learn to Burn class here in Fort Smith. Myself and my private lands biologist here in Fort Smith is a female, Michelle Furr. So we got together and we did a women's Learn to Burn. We did the Learn to Burn 1 class in person, and then we went out to the Ben Guerin Golf Course that's doing excellent restoration work. And we took a group of women out there for the Learn to Burn 2 class and lit it on fire. So, but I think you can go to the Game and Fish's website and they'll have those Learn to Burn 2 classes posted whenever they come up. We try to have at least a couple of them in each area a year. But if you watch those videos, or if you're able to attend an in-person on the Learn to Burn 1, you can then sign up for those Learn to Burn 2 classes.
If there's a lot of interest in that, maybe we can do a WOW Learn to Burn.
Yes, absolutely. If that's something you're interested in, reach out to us, because I think one of you mentioned Morgan Metter that you're working with. Thankfully, we have quite a few female biologists. So there's myself. We have Northwest Arkansas covered by Katrina Sims. She was on the phone call, on the webinar. She's up in Harrison, where I used to be. We've got a female biologist in Northeast Arkansas, to Pocahontas. We've got one in the Delta, and then we've got Morgan in Central Arkansas. So wherever you want to have one, we've got you covered. And then we even have one in, I think she's on here too, Sabrina. She's in Louisiana.
Well, we love our quail forever, folks. We
Yeah.
really
All right.
Are there any other questions, ladies?
Oh, and
I wondered why, excuse me, why those, tell me again why those holes were in those trees on that one slide.
so those holes were in there from woodpeckers. Probably made those holes, but that picture was used to talk about the snag trees that we can create. So we essentially go in and kill the tree, usually with herbicide, and then that allows for animals to utilize them, whether it's for bugging. So oftentimes, the woodpeckers will peck either to, for their nest or when they're bugging, but they'll make those holes in there. That's where those specific holes came from.
Right. So it's my understanding that you all go in and purposefully kill a tree so that wildlife can tap into its natural habitat and do what God has it to do.
Yes. Now,
That's amazing.
we don't necessarily always kill trees. So sometimes there's natural snags. There's tree mortality, trees.
Right. Yeah.
So instead
Right.
of necessarily, I guess, creating them, we retain them. So we say
I see.
so we want to retain these trees. Most people would just go in there and cut them down, but because
Right.
the benefit for wildlife, we'll usually, about 2 to 4 snag trees per acre is really ideal for wildlife habitat anyway. But then sometimes when we have people going in and they're thinning their wood, they'll either use like the cut and drop method, which then essentially the tree is cut on the ground and it's either burned up or hauled off or whatever.
Right.
But sometimes we'll just
Right.
have them, if they're going to kill the tree, just leave it standing. And that's going to provide additional habitat instead of essentially wasting the tree, if you will.
So I need to let John know that then, Jennifer and Candy, that if he's about to thin with Tri-W, that I learned something new. Just leave 2 to 3 snag trees standing, and don't get rid of those
Right.
trees. Leave them there.
Yeah, you can kill them. Like I said, if you're going to kill the tree anyway, or you're going to cut it down instead of burning it up, you can. But you can also drop them, and instead of burning them up, that can create habitat as well. So just being like big logs that are on the ground, those can be considered. Typically, we want to leave bigger trees, like 10 to 12 inches in diameter for these, for them to get really good use out of it. As far as bugging and habitat goes, so they can actually maybe fit in the tree or whatnot. But yeah, it provides a lot of habitat for a lot of and bugging. So a lot of these species eat bugs, and we all know that dead trees really host a plethora of insects that can be used for our woodland birds or whatever as a forage. So
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Well,
Very
I
good.
had Quail Forever. I bought the seed from Quail Forever to do a pollinator plot, which was just a little over an acre. And one thing I did not like about it, I've got lots of water on my property. I've got two big creeks and then a couple of little streams that like little tributaries off of there. And the thing that I didn't like about it, and poison scares me anyway, but I put the herbicide out. I got a tank, put it on back of the side by side, and did it that way. And my family helped me, of course, but they said I needed to do because this is bottomland. It is. I mean, it grows everything. It will grow and grow and grow. It got lots of water, and so my first year after I planted, I only got to put the herbicide out once. They suggested that I do it twice, and I really, really didn't want to put it out because of I just don't want the
Right.
poison on the land. That will kill the little frogs and tadpoles You're going to think I'm crazy, but I like all that stuff. And
No,
so,
I love it too.
but anyway, I did that. And then I came along and I had bought extra seed for that area, for Yell County. And so I put uh, that pollinator seed on it. And the first year I did get something coming up. And the second year, but now when I look out there now, it is just weeds taller than my head, and very few blooms that I see out there. But I really kind of argue with anybody, but I argue that what I should have done is take my little plow and just scrape the earth and then broadcast the seed and not done away with, not use that herbicide, because it didn't seem like, even though I only used it once, it didn't seem like that it got the results that I needed.
Right. And that's the tricky thing with these native plantings. So native grasses, when we do these plantings, they kind of go through 3 phases. You might have heard it. We often say the sleep, creep, and leaf phases. So the first year, the way our natives grow is that first year, they're not going to put on a lot of top growth. And this is the growing season following the planting.
Right.
They're developing an extensive root system that our natives are well known for. So they're putting a lot of resources into that growth below ground. You're not going to see very much come up that first year. That second year, you're going to start seeing it kind of creep up. So it's going from that sleep into that creep. So you're going to see a little bit more. And then by the 3rd and 4th year, you should start seeing that leap where you're going to see a lot of stuff coming up. You'll start to see more blooms, and even throughout the years, even after year 3, it changes every year. Some species take a little bit longer to come in. Some species we don't see till years 4 and 5 of a planting.
Right.
Now, with the site prep, so site prep is critical for any planting, and you are correct. Generally, our recommendation for site prep is going to be a minimum of 2 applications of herbicide, and that's really because we want to hit it. So you have different plants. They have cool season grasses, so like fescue is a big
Right.
problem. That's a cool season. Then you have warm seasons, so your Bermuda, your Johnson grass, your Sericea are the big ones that we try to really hit, because those can become a real problem in our plantings. So we typically do 2 herbicide applications to help combat, make sure we're getting everything that's out there.
Right.
Another reason is oftentimes after that first herbicide application, it'll kill what the herbicide got, but then you've got stuff left in the seed bank that's going to flush back those undesirables, which is another reason why we typically avoid, and now there are times when it's absolutely necessary, we try to avoid any soil disturbance if at all possible. So the tilling or the disking, because number one, you're going to often see a flush of undesirable seeds that are in the seed bank. And as soon as you disturb that soil, and unfortunately, a lot of times it's things that are incredibly difficult, if not nearly impossible, to get rid of without herbicide. So Sericea lespedeza is the one I think of the most. It's incredibly hard it's highly invasive. It produces thousands of seeds, and it likes to grow in those disturbed areas. That's why we often see it on roadsides or where any soil has been disturbed. So if it's in the seed bank, but it's not been expressing itself because it's been suppressed,
Right.
and you disturb that soil, it's going to come back with a vengeance. And unfortunately, Sericea is one of those that without the use of herbicide, similar to Johnson grass and Bermuda, are very hard. We kind of did it to ourselves. We shot ourselves in the foot. We brought in these introduced species and we planted them. And now, unfortunately, for the most part, most of them require a chemical in order to really combat, because they're just such hardy plants, which is why we brought them over here. But now we're trying to get rid of them, and we really kind of shot ourselves in the foot. So unfortunately, that's why I was mentioning the crews, because while a lot of these, herbicide is really, you can do organic methods. Those are typically more costly and take much longer than with herbicides, and are really only feasible on small areas. And with us trying to do landscape scale restoration projects, it's just not feasible to use organic methods. So our goal with herbicides is to use them in the beginning so that we hopefully don't ever have to use them again. So getting that initial work done, and I know, I mean, I deal with that all the time. I myself, especially with certain herbicides, you know, I'm even a little bit leery of them at times, but I do understand that, you know, I have to keep that in my head that we're using them so that we hopefully don't ever have to again. But unfortunately, most of these species are so aggressive, and they produce so many seeds that it's nearly impossible to do it without the use of chemical. Hopefully one day we'll get to that point where we have enough native stuff restored that the use of chemical, you know, will be few and far between, because once we get that site prep and we broadcast, once that seed's in the ground, we're not going to be broadcasting any more herbicide, because then it's going to kill what we planted. Now we might do some spot treatments in areas, but after that, about a year of site prep, we don't want to put any more chemical on the ground.
Okay. Okay, I agree with you.
Fire doesn't help. I mean, fire won't get rid of the fescue and the.
Fire alone will typically not knock them back enough for us to get these plantings. So like the natives, they spend that whole first year putting in a root system. They get very easily outcompeted during that first year. Fescue, that stuff grows very quickly. I mean, you plant that in the next year, I mean, that stuff can get really tall and it shades out and outcompetes those natives. So we often do use fire in combination with herbicide, but for most of these species, like for example, I keep going back to Sericea because that's a big problem that we're seeing, and it's one of the hardest to combat and get rid of. Fire, Sericea actually kind of likes fire. So we can use that to our advantage by spraying, burning, and that burning is going to encourage those grasses to grow back faster, and then we can spray it again so we can knock that seed bank back much quicker by using fire to actually encourage it to grow more. It sounds kind of backwards, but yes, oftentimes we can use fire to help, but for the most part, most of those grasses, fire on by itself, unless you're talking about like repetitive years and years and years, typically doesn't do the job on its own.
Is the Sericea, is that also known as the fireweed? Is that called the fireweed?
Nope. So fireweed, that one has been a hot topic this year. I think it was because of the drought. So fireweed and Sericea are not the same thing. Fireweed is a native annual. There's not really too much concern with it, again, because it is an annual. Oftentimes we'll see it. I think because of this drought, a lot of stuff died. It just flushed up. I saw more of it this year than I have, and I've lived in Arkansas my entire life, than I can remember. But I've seen a lot of people posting about it. So we don't normally treat that with herbicide unless it's just taken over an entire field. You can manage that if you haven't already planted. You can mow it down, before it goes to seed if you're that worried about it. Or if you have planted, you just want to set that mower real high. Make sure you're not mowing your natives down, but you can set that mower up high and mow those tops off of it, because it can get tall and it can start to shade out your natives underneath it. But for the most part, you'll see it flush. And then because it's an annual, it'll slowly just it'll take care of itself. So not really one that we're super concerned with, unlike the Sericea. That one,
You have a picture. Do you have a picture of the Sericea? How do you spell that?
It is Sericea, I believe. And it's Sericea lespedeza. Let me see if I can.
That's it.
Lespedeza. Okay.
Oh, it's the Lepsideza. All right.
Sericea lespedeza.
It's Lespedeza cunata is the scientific name.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Tabitha, do you have a picture?
I can probably.
Not that I can share.
Let me pull one up real quick and I'll share my screen and show y'all what I'm talking about. It's
While she's doing that, since we were talking about herbicides and pesticides, I want to remind anyone who is a tree farmer that it is now required that you track all of your herbicide and pesticide usage. So if you are using chemical, you can go to the AFA website on the tree farm page, and there is a downloadable form. You don't have to use that form, but it's a easy form that you can just fill in and save. You do have to track all herbicide and pesticide usage. Don't forget.
And on that note, it's always good if you are using herbicide to track that, because there are certain herbicides that do have residual activity. There are certain herbicides that will target, if you're trying to target grasses, will also target your trees. So if you have trees in an area that you don't want anything to happen to you, but you're spraying a field next to it, be very cautious with that. There are several herbicides that will also kill those trees out, or you'll get that non-targeted kill. So herbicides, it's no joke. I mean, there's a lot of different
Well,
ways.
all the fuss, all the discussion about the cotton plants and using that, and the fact that it drifts, and
Yeah.
just being aware of that.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I say, if you're not 100% comfortable with applying herbicides, we have resources out there for landowners. We have people that are trained, that know how to do this, that know when to put herbicide and when not to. So, when it's really hot, if it's too windy, I mean, they know all this stuff. So, we can really help to mitigate any of those kind of off-site effects. If there's wetlands, if it's super rocky soil, we know not to use certain chemicals because those chemicals can travel into the soil. They leach and get into our water supply. They leach into the groundwater. So there's a lot that goes into chemicals. When I started delving into them, I was amazed at the amount of stuff that you have to think about when you're making chemical recommendations. So yeah, it's definitely nothing to take lightly. I mean, it's not like, oh, well, yeah, just go out and spray everything. I mean, you need a plan. When you're applying herbicide, you want a good detailed plan that what do I need to spray, at what rate will it work, and where I'm not putting out more than I need. We want to put out just the right amount to get the job done and not in excess. What am I trying to target? What am I not wanting to target? All that kind of stuff has to be taken into consideration when you're using herbicides, because it's really, I mean, it's again, nothing to take lightly. We really want to be cautious when we're using these herbicides.
Yeah, then the professionals come and they spray it on with a helicopter. And I've often wondered, how do they know where it's going to go? I guess that's what you're paying them for.
Right.
I mean, we're talking acres at a time, not just a plot.
Yeah, most of what I deal with, I don't have any experience dealing really with the aerial applications. I know that that's very common. Most of what I'm doing, on the ground is either hack and squirt, which is you're spraying herbicide directly into the tree, or on these native plantings, you're using a boom or boomless sprayer out there, and you know where it's going pretty much. I don't have a whole lot of experience with the aerial applications from the helicopters.
Since we have Tabitha on the line, Tabitha, does the beetle pine program include any herbicide? I mean, does that involve anything like that? Because is Tabitha still with us?
It's just for first commercial thinning and pre-commercial thinning, which is usually chainsaw work.
First commercial thinning. Okay, so I'll have first commercial thinning, and what else is it?
Pre-commercial
You broke up. Maybe you
or
can
a
put it.
non-commercial.
First
Any
commercial and
non-commercial
first
thinning?
non-commercial. Is that what you said?
Is that what she said?
Yeah.
I wonder if that involves mine. I'll have to look into that so that I can be in compliance and report that to Jennifer. Yeah, I want to be in compliance. I didn't know. I didn't realize it was required, Jennifer. That's good to know. Serious business. Okay.
Yep.
All right, I've got some, I'm gonna share real quick. I've got some of the, if y'all can see my screen, some pictures of
All
that
right.
Lespedeza. You've probably all seen it. I don't know if you can, so there's kind of a picture, a wider picture of what it looks like. Now it is important to remember, there are some native Lespedezas, some Lespedezas that look very similar to the Sericea. I don't have any pictures that show you that difference. It's really in the venation. So the veins within the leaf is kind of how you tell that difference. But if you've seen it, you've probably seen it along roadsides. It's very prevalent along roadsides, in ditches. It can get fairly tall. It gets like a little white bloom on it. see if I can find a picture of the blue. So I don't know if you can see it.
And so quail don't like that? Quail it's too tall for, I mean, it's not the kind of grass that quail like.
No, absolutely not. So there was at one point in time where we planted Sericea because we thought that it was very beneficial for quail, and because it grows in areas where other things won't, we also planted it for erosion control. Then turns out it's highly invasive. It will take over an area. As far as the quail go, now what happened with that is, quail will eat the seeds produced by the Sericea lespedeza. Unfortunately, the seed, they're not able to digest the seeds. So while they do eat it, they can't digest it. So they really don't get anything from the Sericea lespedeza.
There's a picture of a goat in the bottom. Maybe goats eat it. I think that's a goat.
Yes.
Yes.
So I don't have very much experience with grazing on it. I have heard. I worked with a lady up in Harrison, and she had goats, and she had said that her goats would munch on the Sericea. But the real issue we get with Sericea comes from the fact that it produces so many seeds each year that it's quite easy to kill the top part of the Sericea, but there's so many seeds in the seed bank that it just keeps coming back. So oftentimes that's why I say it takes so long to battle it, because we basically just have to keep hitting it until we work a good way through that seed bank so that our natives have a chance to actually get established. Because if we don't, the Sericea grows very quickly, and it'll grow tall. As you can see in the pictures, it can get fairly tall. And then it will just shade out the natives that are trying to come in. So it's one that it's a constant battle. So.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I mean, that's a help. Now I've seen that. Yeah. Now
Yep.
I've seen that. Right.
All right. Well, are there any other final questions?
No, I enjoyed it.
Yeah. You have to hear it over and over again to really.
Grass.
Yeah. And there's so much information. It's like drinking from a fire hose most of the time. I mean, usually I'm just talking and it's just coming out, and I don't know what I've said and what I haven't, because there's so much information. So yeah, I encourage all of y'all, if you're interested or you want any more information, please reach out to us, because we have a lot of resources that we can help you with. There's programs out there. So I encourage each one of you to work in your areas with your local NRCS office, your foresters, your game and fish private lands biologists. If you have a Quail Forever person in your area, definitely reach out to them. They're all great resources to have.
Thank you.